Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to be breaking down your horoscopes for the month of July. I will be joined by my friend, colleague, and co-host Alex Amorosi, and I'm also really excited to bring on another co-host this month who's going to be helping us out, a Nightlight alumni named Dana Solara, and I'm really excited to introduce you guys to Dana. This is part of a movement that's been happening lately to try and bring in some other really talented alumni to showcase and introduce you guys to some other talented creators and astrologers who are out there who have come through our community space. So I'm really excited to have Dana here. I'll introduce you to her in a moment, and then we will be off talking about your horoscopes for the month. A lot of big astrology to cover this month. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, though, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections. We'd love to hear from you. You can find a transcript of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. There's a couple of things I want to promote today that are happening this month of July. I'm going to take you over to the website first to show you. If you go to the events page, click on the speaker series talk. Our summer speaker series starts July 13th. We have talks on the 13th, 14th, and 21st this month. They are all free, so you can register for free to get the link to those webinars. And then if you can't attend live, you get a recording afterward. Dreaming the Decans with T. Susan Chang is one that I'm really excited about because she is a well-known author who has written and is a real expert on the decans in astrology and their relation to the tarot. So very excited for that. Erica Beach will be giving, she's a Nightlight staffer and alumni, and she will be giving a talk on Sedna. And Jeannie Frisha, who is also a Nightlight alumni, will be giving a talk on the intersection between artists, the astrology of the birth charts of artists, and their works of art. So really excited for that. She's also a Nightlight alumni. So it follows in that trend that I've been mentioning, where we are really looking to showcase and empower people who are coming through our communities and learning. The reason for that is that there just aren't a lot of spaces for talented astrologers to be shown off, right? It's like it's kind of this weird thing where you're expected to build a platform, but you need one to build your your work. So it's a good thing that we hope to do to empower talented people who are coming through our community so that you guys can get to know really cool astrologers. Anyway, if you go to the live talks page under events, you'll see my webinar on July 18th. Uranus and Gemini is coming up. You register, you get a link. If you can't attend live, you get the recording later. You can see all the other webinars we've done this year. They are also available for sale there on the website under the events page or in the shop page, where you can find lots of other cool stuff. So on that note, I am really excited to have Alex and Dana with me today. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Yay.
Dana!
Woo!
Yay!
I'm so excited to introduce to you guys Dana Solara, who is a wonderful astrologer, Nightlight alumni, has been doing really cool things. Actually, a couple of years ago, I featured her on a series that I did for a while on becoming a professional astrologer, and we talked about your journey starting to create content and working, to start your consulting practice and all sorts of stuff. You've been doing great work. I love your personality. You're really fun with the way you deliver astrology. I've been a fan on Instagram for a few years, ever since we did that series, and you came through Nightlight as part of your astrological journey. Really glad to have you here. Maybe you could just say a few words about yourself and why you love astrology, how you got into it, just so everyone can get to know you for a second.
Sure. So I'm Dana. I'm from St. Louis, where I currently live. I have been studying astrology on my own since like 2018-ish, and then joined Adam's programs in 2021. Kind of hit that place where you get a little blocked learning on your own, right? And you need a teacher. So I was really grateful to find Adam and just kind of start learning from him. I am a big nerd. I love to learn. I'm a high school English teacher. And so I love reading. I love talking about symbolism, Mercury and Pisces, Gemini stellium. And so, yeah, it's a little bit about me. And I would love if this episode could just be Adam giving me compliments and telling me how great I am. We could just keep that going the whole time. That'd be real fun for me. So.
Awesome. I'm going to tell you more about how you can get to know Dana at the end of today's episode. You can find her on Instagram at selfhelpwitch. Her website is also selfhelpwitch.com/club, where she has a new offering that she is getting started with. And we will come around to that at the end today. So she's going to tell you a little bit more about how to get in touch with her when we're done with horoscopes. Awesome. Big transits this month. We are looking today in horoscopes. I'm going to pull the real-time clock up, and we're going to take a look at our transits of the month. We're focusing, as you guys know, for horoscopes, we tend to focus on some of the biggest things that are happening. We don't go blow by blow. We pick the biggest transits of the month, and we sort of go from there. So one of the things that's happening this month that we're going to be featuring in how we break down horoscopes, we have a whole bunch of oppositions from planets entering Leo to the opposition with Pluto at the early degrees of Aquarius. And that just repeats all month long. Here we have at the beginning of the month, we have Mercury coming through into Leo and opposing Pluto. If we take this forward a little bit, we have Venus coming through around the middle of the month. This is about July 12th. Venus will oppose Pluto from Leo to Aquarius. And then we take the sun forward through the same dynamic around July 22nd into the 23rd. The sun will oppose Pluto in Aquarius. So it's just this repetition of Plutonian oppositions this month, which are a very big deal. And then in the middle of the month, the other major transit that we have right on the heels of Venus opposing Pluto, we also get the very dynamic conjunction between Mars and Uranus. So here is that conjunction between Mars and Uranus in the sign of Taurus. We are going to be exploring that conjunction in your whole sign house of Taurus today, along with all of the oppositions from planets entering Leo and opposing Pluto in Aquarius. Those houses will be the ones that we're sort of broadly exploring for all 12 signs. And we're going to be alternating. I'm going to take the cardinal signs. Dana's going to take the fixed signs. Alex is going to take the mutable signs, and then we are also going to throw in some commentary as we go after each of us have finished our little sections. And so we decided to break it down that way. I thought it'd be kind of a fun way to work through the 12-sign horoscopes. But before we do that, any thoughts that you guys have just immediately that jump out to you about these oppositions to Pluto or the Mars-Uranus conjunction? Like what stands out to you when you guys are looking at July? Don't all talk at once.
I'm thinking about Venus because this conjunction in Taurus is obviously ruled by Venus, and we're getting just before this the opposition from Venus. I'm just thinking a lot about Venus and what we really want kind of coming to the forefront, and realizing maybe how we've tried to ignore that with this Pluto dynamic, sort of the things that we've been kind of repressing and ignoring coming to the surface and being really important and playing a role in that conjunction happening in Taurus.
Yeah, the level of Venusian desire, like what do you want? What do you love? What are you attracted to? And there's some kind of confrontation with those forces, and it's sort of bubbling up to the surface. With Mars Uranus, it strikes me as something that we could be like, we may need to advocate for somehow. With the Mars Uranus strikes me as like, no, it's okay that I want this. I will want it. I don't care what you think. Like it could get a little gnarly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think especially because Venus is not far from coming out as the evening star. And right after this opposition, and the sun will be opposing Pluto right as that's happening. Venus is going to come out around 14 or 15 of Leo. There's Adam, remember where we used that example of the Millennium Falcon coming out of the Death Star? Yeah. It has, again, that sort of feeling of like you are going at breakneck speed, and there's something that's going to emerge and probably be pretty cathartic and pretty amazing. But there's a sort of need for Venusian temperance and harmony around the sort of radical energies that are coming out around, Mars and Uranus about these oppositions to Pluto. Like, you have to keep control of the Millennium Falcon as it's leaving the Death Star. Otherwise you crash. Dana, by the way, I warned you the level of nerd. And I'm just hitting there.
Yeah.
I do know about the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to the Star Wars Club.
I just like to start from the nerd place. But, I think that there's Pluto, I think one of the great things Pluto does is it takes you down to a level of sort of primal instinct and want and desire. And I think sometimes we think of those things as bad, especially when they're not tempered. But sometimes it's like, are you really satisfied on a very deep level with the Venus areas of life, or the Mercury areas of life, the Sun areas of life? Are you really at the base of that satisfaction, or is there something else that just kind of needs to emerge that will feel liberating in some way with the Mars Uranus conjunction?
Yeah. There's I also think about the fact that, this is so closely connected to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, and that behind that conjunction is the desire to shift things that are tangible, because it's Earth. Shift things that are tangible, meaning change things that have form. It's not like air, like Jupiter and Gemini, for example. I think about exploring of ideas and concepts and shifting how we think and perceive and exploring possibilities and curiosity. When I think about Mars Uranus in Taurus, I think about something like, I'm going to add a porch to my house, and it's going to feature, a place for me to gather with friends, and there's going to be plants, and I'm going to have shovels that I use to clear the space. And I think about things that are very tangible and connected to what we see as enjoyable or valuable, or maybe secure, how we create security. So it's a weird pairing, because Mars is already like the bull in the china shop in Taurus. Mars wants to do things very actively and aggressively. Venus is a little bit, Venus is better at harmonizing as she creates what she wants. She's more flowy in that respect. So here, Mars is trying to act with Uranus on behalf of something Venusian. Venus has just gone through this opposition with Pluto. It feels like, there's this kind of eruptive force around Venusian things. That could also be about the need to disturb the balance or the peace or the picture of harmony or the stability or the values in order to shift something, that there's a disturbance of peace that has to happen, at least temporarily. It's sort of like, look, if you want the garden, you're going to have some bulldozers in your backyard for a little while, because they've got to clear earth and flatten it and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. It's like, it's something I'm kind of guessing by the time Venus emerges as the evening star, she'll be showing something that's been in the works for months, and it'll probably be lovely and beautiful. But I got to think that we're going to get there through a little bit of turbulence this month.
A little bit of creative chaos.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
That's a very Venus, sort of Mars and Venus sign type thing.
Yeah. Well, let's roll. Let's get into it. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with Aries here. And we're going to start, if you can listen to this, by the way, we say this every month, but we recommend your rising sign, because in ancient astrology and Indian astrology, everything is by whole sign houses. And so your birth chart, if you are a Aries rising, the whole sign house version of your birth chart will match with the transits of the horoscope, which is why we recommend listening to your rising sign. You'll get the actual location of the transiting planets in your birth chart. If you listen for your sun sign, that's fine, but just know that you're artificially taking the sun sign and placing it as the rising sign. That adjusts where everything is at and does not have a correlation to your birth chart unless you were literally born with the sun in the first house. So that's why we recommend that. We say that every month. So it's funny how we say it every month, we explain it every month, and I get like a dozen questions in the comment section asking the same things. I always want to be like, you're getting a B- because you're not a good student. You're not listening.
Did you follow directions?
I know.
What did Mr. Elenbaas say? What did Mr. Elenbaas say?
I don't want to be a jerk, so I'm not going to say anything, and I'll just repeat it again next month. And I'm going to be dying on my deathbed, and I'm going to be like, the rising sign is really best.
Luke.
So the other thing I should mention, by the way, on the day of the Mars-Uranus conjunction, we have a moon in Scorpio. It's not like it's a light day. It's it's a really spicy period of the month. Anyway, so from start to finish, this month is about these oppositions from planets to Pluto, from Leo, and then the Mars-Uranus conjunction, which is smack dab in the middle of the month. So think about these transits as spanning the month, but the Mars-Uranus dynamic especially coming in the middle. Now, when it comes to Aries, the Mars-Uranus conjunction lands in your second house, where Uranus has been gradually working since 2018 to shift the landscape of your resources. So your resources can be things that you have or cultivate within yourself, skills, talents, abilities, things that you place a value on with respect to yourself and your own worth as a being. Well, I'm worthy because I learned how to read, write, I learned how to teach, I learned how to be an astrologer. Or it can be things like money or literal possessions and assets. Mars Uranus in that house for you, Aries, suggests that there's an opportunity to continue revolutionizing what you have, what you're in possession of, what you're cultivating, what you're developing. And it could be that that especially since Jupiter Uranus in April, that you've been really working with a new set of resources or new materials, or that you've been starting to receive the fruits of your labor from years past. Jupiter and Uranus gradually working together over the course of the whole last year could have been bringing you to a point of cultivating something that you're now harvesting. But there's still changes that are depicted here for you this month with respect to resources, and a kind of revolutionary energy that's suggesting that you need to go further. There's more you need to do. I suspect because every single point of emphasis between Leo and Aquarius is happening across your 5th and 11th houses, that it is connected intimately to your creativity. The 5th house is a place that was called the joy derived from your dharma in Indian astrology, which is a way of saying what comes forth from you that feels like it most closely resembles your essence creatively. That's why it's a place that's connected to our children. But when you see Mercury, Venus, the sun all entering the 5th house, and each opposing Pluto in the 11th, a place where the expectation is that we conform to a certain level socially, that we find like-minded people and allies, and places where we can contribute and join with others with respect to our ambitions, our career, our involvement in the society we live in. So when I see all of these planets opposing in the 5th, opposing Pluto in the 11th, I think, okay, there's a tension this month for Aries between what I need to do to feel most in touch with my creative essence and who I'm expected to be socially. And those are in a kind of intense dialogue this month. And at the same time, there's this continued pressure to shift and change and revolutionize what you have, what you're in possession of, how you make money, how you earn money, what skills you're in the process of cultivating. So that conversation between resources, creativity, and social pressure, and where you want to place your social energy, attention, and involvement, and maybe where you need to pull back or change something so that you're honoring more of your own creative essence. That's where I see the tension this month for Aries. But let me ask Dana and Alex, what do you guys think about Aries horoscope this month? Anything that stands out to you?
I love this moment as an opportunity to use your creative talents in a way that's bringing you more resources. Like your creativity is the resource. And maybe there's some new insight around how those things could work together. And as you said, Adam, like the reworking of resources, this has been ongoing for Aries risings with Jupiter moving through. And so it feels sort of like a culminating moment where there's this creative breakthrough. I think about Uranus as the Promethean kind of archetype. And there's some new idea about how you can use what you make and what you like, the beauty you want to produce in the world.
Nice.
I love that. I love that. And I think also about like I often think of what a revolution in Taurus means, with Uranus and Mars when they come together. And for an Aries rising, it might be a revolution here might actually lead to more stability, more sense of grounding, more sense of, with finances, maybe feeling like, it's time to have a little bit more of a cushion so that I can start out on a creative endeavor that might require not bring in as much income as I might think at first, but I have a nice sense of stability there. And then opposing Pluto in the 11th house is like, seeing who are the people who are really going to have your back no matter what in that regard. And, being really discerning about I think Adam, you said it really well with that sense of pressure, like the social pressures, which ones are really helpful to kind of hone your creative ability and which are ones that like feel like they're controlling you off a path that you may not want to go on. So I think that Pluto is really interesting as a discernment piece this month for Aries risings.
Love that. Yeah. Nice. I think we've said some nice things there. Let's move to Taurus, and I'm going to hand things over to Dana, and I'm going to draw here the connections that we're making between the planets here that are opposing and the Mars-Uranus conjunction here.
This arrow is a little bit weak, Adam. I'm just saying. It could be
I'll get it bigger next time.
All right. Well, Taurus risings, it's no surprise. This is a big deal for you because we've got your first, 10th, and 4th houses activated here. So let's start with what's going on in the first with this Mars-Uranus conjunction. This is a major breakthrough in your self-concept. It's been working since Uranus moved into Taurus in 2018. So this is maybe not new, but it's really kind of pushing through, breaking through the soil, so to speak. And it's a change in how you see yourself. There's something very different about how you want to move through the world, how you want to show up, that you're kind of crystallizing right now and ready to embody, because we are talking about Taurus and this really tangible sort of energy. So you might be realizing just certain aspects of your self-identity have outgrown their current forms. I like this as a way of being very courageous about stepping into a new role. That's what Mars is great for. At the same time, there is this impulsivity behind it. I was thinking about, if anybody, Adam and Alex, you may not be able to relate, but if you've ever cut your bangs, anybody ever cut their bangs out
Only
there?
once. I was in college. Only once.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
That's something I just love to do.
Okay.
You're right there, Adam. They're just going to go up a little bit.
I thought so. I feel like this is a moment where you're like, I'm doing it. And there's the potential that you just cut too high, right? And you can take that metaphorically. Like, this can be taken too far because it is quite impulsive. But I think ultimately it's very helpful for us just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and saying, this is who I am. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. And as we said with Aries risings, this is intimately linked to what's going on with these oppositions between planets moving into Leo, opposing Pluto. So for our Taurus risings, this is happening in your 4th and 10th house. There's something that's ready to be composted in your public life, in your career. That's Pluto in the 10th. Something you're realizing is not working for you anymore, that you've outgrown. This could be just realizing the way that you approach work is not working for you anymore. And it's definitely related to family, home, and your deepest, most personal, intimate inner world as well. So I'm thinking about realizing that maybe you want to spend more time with family. Maybe you don't want to be as focused on work all the time, and you're ready to just sort of step into a new role there. And there we get the first house coming into play. So that's what I'm seeing for Taurus risings, more of a focus on the inner world, and that kind of creating tension and maybe having to make some tough choices between how we show up publicly in our career and how we really are on the inside, and then getting that courage with the conjunction in the first house to make those changes.
Love it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like, just to piggyback off from that, and then Alex, I want to hear what you have to say too. I feel, as an honorary member of the Taurus Rising Club, I feel like the Mars-Uranus conjunction is, like, for Tauruses, it is uncomfortable to feel like you are disturbing anyone or anything, because you identify as an agent of peace or stability. You're like, if you're, you know, like, I find myself at a sporting event and the guy sitting next to me is angry about whatever's happening in the game, and I feel like the pressure is on me to somehow contribute to the peace in the surrounding 2 aisles. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I you know, so I might say like, it's frustrating, isn't it? Like, you know, or like I might do something, and I feel like, and I'm just making up a silly example, but I feel like I can feel a growing pressure in me as we're talking about this, especially since it's on my ascendant. I feel like there are there's certain ways you cannot change, you cannot grow, you cannot create things unless you're willing to sort of be a person who is somewhat disruptive to others and their ideas about you. It's like, your idea about me is none of my business. And that feels so offensive for me to say right now, but that's sort of how I feel with it coming around my ascendant. Uranus is on my ascendant as we're having this talk. And I just feel that way. Like, Ashley, my wife, is like a double Taurus. So she gets it completely. And it hasn't, like, I've found that this has mostly been to do with interacting with other people outside of my home and family and stuff like this. So thankfully, Ashley's not getting the backlash of any of this, you know, in our relationship. But she's like, I've just noticed lately that you're sort of like I don't give a damn what you think about me. Your ideas about me are none of my freaking business, you know? And like, that is so unusual for me as a Taurus. So I'll just put that out there.
It's so funny. I keep thinking of, what was that book that came out a few years ago called The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck? It's like,
yeah.
It really has that kind of feeling to it, which for Venus ruled anything is really difficult, because there's that sense of, like you said, wanting to keep the harmony. You know, my moon's ruled by Venus. I get this, Adam, of like, I want to caretake the people around me, or is there a disruption in the harmony? Make sure you're okay. But there's a limit to individual growth, like you said, when you want to do that. And I think that it really helps to, the gauge or the discernment this month, I think, for Taurus risings is just that sense of like, where do I have to liberate myself where it feels like I can breathe, but maybe where, you know, then knowing the line where it might be getting obnoxious. But I don't see that happening with earth signs particularly. There's usually a sense of like the pragmatism of it that gives me that sense of like, I'm liberated now. I can be myself as I choose to be. It doesn't always have to be accommodating or caring of the harmony around me.
It does feel like whatever the personal need is, it's relating back to the dynamics around, you know, your public facing self, your career, and the need for the private, intimate sphere of life to be adjusted somehow in relation to one another. So I love that you touched on that. Let's go forward to Gemini, trying to keep us on a good pace here. And I'm going to put this over. I'm going to draw. You go ahead and talk, Alex.
This is really interesting to me with the 12th house. You know, Mars and Uranus in the 12th house, there are so many aspects of our psyche that are under the surface. This is very 12th house that we don't see, that are like little shadow marionette strings that control us without us realizing it. Our behavior, our thoughts, our actions, the habits that we say, I don't want to keep doing this, but I keep feeling impulsive, all that sort of idea. And I think Mars and Uranus can be a real lightning strike moment. You know, last night we had some really big thunderstorms here last night. And like, there was this one clap of lightning that went off that like lit up the whole night sky for a moment and then went dark again. I feel like that's kind of what's happening here with Mars and Uranus in the 12th house. There's a sense of like a sudden flash of an insight into the unconscious or the spaces that you haven't always seen that you can't unsee once you see it. It may take some work to kind of excavate it out, but it's like it's there. And all of a sudden it becomes fairly obvious. And it also feels like, again, that one of the things that can happen with Uranus is the big exhale, the relief of like, okay, now that I see that, now that I'm aware of that, it begins to loosen its grip. And, you know, that could be very, very intimately related to, you know, this third ninth house axis being illuminated by the oppositions from Leo to Aquarius, to Pluto and Aquarius, a real restructuring in outdated belief systems that have become toxic. And I don't think toxic doesn't always mean like, abusive or something like that. It can also just mean past its prime. Like it's been in the refrigerator too long. It's got to be cleaned out. You know, you got to get some Windex out and clean the counter. There's a feeling of like, I've believed this for so long, or thought this, or ordered the world in one way for so long that it's now become stagnant. And you kind of need to, Pluto kind of comes in and pulls out the clog from the drain and says, you can think about things totally differently. You can order your belief systems totally differently. You can jettison what you want to jettison and allow the new to come in. And very much related then to your third house, which is the everyday environment around you, which again, I think mirrors this. You and I have talked about this, Adam, how that mirrors the subconscious in that we don't realize how much our everyday existence is a reflection of some of our deepest beliefs. And as those begin to change, you may just notice spontaneously things in your immediate environment are changing, and it feels very organic, or it may feel a little bit, maybe there's a big flash of instability with Mars and Uranus. But once that happens, especially as Venus moves towards the end of July and comes out as the evening star, there's a sense of my space has been reordered in a more harmonious way. I feel that it like kind of organically. So I'm just thinking of my third house is really lit up right now. So that's also cool.
We forgot to actually mention that this is Gemini rising. We didn't actually state, hey, Geminis, this is for you. So all of that was for you. But Dana, what do you think?
Alex, what you said had me sort of thinking about this opposition in the third of the ninth being the realization of a disconnect between what you say you believe and what you actually do. Like, what does your day-to-day life look like? And this conjunction in the 12th maybe being a moment of like, Oh, the philosophies I say I adhere to and really invest in, like either they're not working for me or I realize they're not working for me because I'm not actually doing them in my daily life. So
Yeah.
kind of using
I love
that
that.
awareness of the conjunction to recalibrate somewhere.
I love that.
I would say what really intrigues me about this, and I was just kind of creating this as you guys were talking, is okay, so you're a Gemini, you've just gotten Jupiter rolling into your first house, and you're already a person, if you're Gemini rising, who loves to explore everything in relation to ideas about everything and playing with them in the same way that I feel like, like here's an example. Like you would never say to a dog, well, until I understand exactly what your nature is, I can't have a relationship with you. Like that's absurd. No one would do that. Instead, we have a relationship with the dog. The dog has a relationship with us. We have experiences. Our ideas about the dog change. Probably on some level, the ideas the dog has about us changes, however dogs do that. And then over time, we gradually start to say, I feel like I know my dog. And maybe it doesn't take us very long. Maybe it's only a couple of weeks, right? But knowledge is always a byproduct of relation. Like we can start saying, I know someone because I relate with them. Geminis have the interesting piece of, like, I feel like one of the ways that Geminis interact with the world is that it's a little bit more like saying, I have to play with my ideas about you and you with me constantly. And that actually is the act. Like my dog and I might play tug of war or go for a walk. For Geminis, it's let's play with our ideas about each other. And that will gradually lead to us getting to know one another. And that for Geminis right now, what I feel is really interesting is that when Jupiter enters your first house, you're really doing that with yourself. It's like, let me play with all of the ideas that I have about myself and let me explore them. Well, as Gemini is doing that, there's like this incredible flashpoint for how ideas about yourself are interacting with your relationships. The beliefs and ideas that you hold about the world and other people are interacting with new spaces you're charting within yourself. And that's leading also to this like super flashpoint moment of Mars Uranus in the 12th. You're probably getting in touch with something that you didn't know before, you didn't see before, or your ideas about yourself and other people are all like sort of changing dramatically, in relation to this Mars Uranus conjunction. And then Mars goes into the first house with Geminis, and I feel like then you get to try it on. You get to now enact new ideas and move forward with them in ways that are maybe more conscious and in your control, as opposed to this month there being things that are going to come up that you can't anticipate necessarily.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that was really fun to riff off from. I loved that one. So let's go on to Cancer. And here we have the oppositions across the 2nd and the 8th. And then we have the Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 11th. So this is interesting because what I would say, first of all, for Cancers is that your Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 11th suggests the potential for major disruptions within groups that you belong to. That may not really even have anything to do with you. Like an organization you could find that suddenly, like just recently I heard the news that NCGR Philadelphia is closing down because they haven't been active and producing, revenue since COVID. Like that's a bummer. That's a major astrological organization. I've spoken there before. So like, could there be groups or organizations, that have meant something to you that are going through some kind of turbulent moment of change? That's at least one way of looking at that. The other way would be, what's your relation or involvement with various groups of people, and how are you needing to individuate, separate, stand out or apart? Or are there various groups that are involved in revolutionary activities or causes that you feel like you need to get involved with? I could see any of those kind of impulses or changes happening for Cancers in the house of groups, friends, colleagues, and so forth. There's a kind of parallel with the ruler Venus going through this opposition to Pluto, and a bunch of planets going through oppositions to Pluto from the 2nd to the 8th. That also suggests to me that there's an evaluation of resources, time, money, energy, what you're trying to build or develop or cultivate, and how that's related to the kinds of groups that fit with the changes you're trying to make and what you have, how you earn, what you're cultivating. So there's this interesting like intersection between the broader social connections that you have and changes that you're trying to make around your resources. The opposition to Pluto in Aquarius to me also suggests that you're having to evaluate where to place time, money, energy, and resources in relation to, again, other people. The Pluto in Aquarius in the 8th is to me about what kind of allied resources should you be coming together with and which should you be maybe parting from. And that's correlating with this shift in the 11th house space of friends and allies. So that's how I'm seeing it for Cancers. I feel like it's really interesting, for example, that my wife, who's a Cancer rising, I'll be with her and my kids at an herb conference in Colorado that she's teaching at while this is happening. So I'm like, ooh, we're going to be in a like very Taurian 11th house herbal setting. Should be interesting. I'll have my popcorn ready for the drama, you know?
You said I was speaking first. You said I was speaking first.
Oh my God. What do you guys think about? Does anything stand out to you about Cancer this month?
I think, this Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 11th house for Cancer risings, and the impetus of Cancer is always to nurture, care, the moon, contain, create a nice, safe emotional environment. It reminds me a little bit of what you were saying about Taurus, Adam, is this, I sense this sense of, and Dana, there was this sense of, I can break free of needing to keep the peace and harmony within a group all the time. There might be a sense with the Taurus 11th house and a Cancer rising. I need to nurture, I need to care, I need to kind of even sometimes feel like I need to corral or contain or control the emotional environment around me. And Mars and Uranus is going to say, like, fuck the emotional environment around you. You get to do your own thing. You get to hang out. You get to you get to stand out, and that's okay. It's okay for you to sort of be prominent and your own individual contribution to be recognized, even within a group. That doesn't always have to be disruptive to the emotional dynamics of a group. It actually might be really helpful in a lot of ways. And I just think Pluto in the 8th house can be a good ally here for turning over, forgive the farm analogy, but it seems to be going with me, of turning over the earth in the more deeply ingrained areas of where you might feel like you're sort of tied to things or pulled towards things, or that it's hard to break the bond. But once you break that bond, it frees you and your sense of being able to exchange with others or to receive for yourself. Or it could also be a sense of like where you want to form deeper and more lasting integrated bonds with people. And that might be going through a transformational phase right now. But those are the things that really stand out for me.
Yeah.
I agree, Alex. That's a lot of what I was thinking. There's this real reclamation of what do I need, and how can I say that in a group. But there's no longer a need to. There's like a lack of fear around speaking your needs right now because of this really like courageous Mars and this Pluto dynamic in the 8th that's maybe making you realize how this is not good for you, your involvement in these groups, and the ways in which you're sharing what you have needs to be renegotiated. There's a clarity around that right now and a courageousness to say, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not afraid to break with the group now.
Yeah. Nice. So Cancers, that was for you. Now, Leos, we have an honorary Leo Rising Club member here. Dana, by the way, what's your rising sign? Is it okay if I ask?
I'm a Libra rising.
Okay, we'll get to you. It'll be fair. Don't worry. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to highlight the, here we go. So we've got big stuff happening around the 1st and 7th, and then the Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 10th. So Dana, what do you think about this one?
All right, Leo rising. So with this conjunction in the 10th, we're getting a strong need for personal revolution and breakthrough regarding your career and your public roles. So something about your work is ready to just change. It's a feeling that's been building, and it could feel really dramatic, the ways in which you're ready to just step out of the way things have been done. It made me think about just being in a cubicle and saying, you know what, I'm leaving. Like it's that kind of energy. I'm walking out. I'm freeing myself from this situation. And we are in a Venus ruled sign, of course. So there's something to say about what you desire in your work, in your public roles, and sort of freeing yourself from these outdated identities. in your public life so that you can step into something that's more aligned with what you deeply desire for the work that you do in the world. And I am still thinking about Uranus as the Promethean spark. So this could be a creative breakthrough in your work that maybe you've been scared to really like take the leap on doing. So I love that as sort of like taking your work in a really different direction. I think there is a need for mindfulness of what you want to change, because again, this is sort of an impulsive energy. It may be necessary, you know, to really just focus on yourself right now. And there's that uncomfortable feeling with Mars and Taurus, right? It's very like self-focused, but in this sort of other focused energy of Taurus. See where you can kind of negotiate that. It is a moment to focus on what you're really trying to bring out into the world and who you want to be in your public roles. But keep in mind, you know, how it's going to affect the community as well, because we're in a Venus ruled sign. So that's part of this. Which takes us to the first 7th house axis here. So as Venus and the Sun transit through your first house of self, they're going to oppose the Pluto in the 7th house of relationships and your closest partnerships. So this is going to create a strong urge for change and transformation in your closest relationships that is also somehow going to affect your identity. There's tension between how you see yourself and what's going on in your partnerships. And we're trying to negotiate that tension and maybe find a balance, or maybe we're having to choose. Mm-hmm. So with the first house, I'm thinking about Venus and the Sun kind of pulling a spotlight on how you see yourself and this increased awareness of who you are and how you see yourself. I'm thinking with Pluto in the 7th, I don't know if you guys have ever read this play by Jean-Paul Sartre called No Exit. He was an existentialist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It's been a long time since I've read it, but there's this character who's obsessed with looking at herself in the mirror. And there are no mirrors in this hotel room that we find out later is actually their personal version of hell. And it's because when she can see herself, she's like grounded in her own identity. And I always think about that with the 7th house, in that other people are mirrors for us. Whenever we have stuff going on in the 7th house, we're able to kind of discover something about ourselves in a way that we couldn't do on our own. And I'm thinking about that a lot for Leos, because there's something that's ready to be composted in the relationship that's making you think back about your own identity, your own role in the relationship. So there's something that's being negotiated through relationships that's being transformed, that's also sort of changing the way that you see yourself as well.
Nice. Yeah. I feel like there's a connection with the change that you're making around public facing self, career, how you show up in the world, the reputation, the change there is sort of being forced somehow, or the pressure behind it is coming in a sense from this sort of exploration of relationships. It's like the two are so connected.
Dana, that was an awesome reading. Thank you. I really appreciate it, because it was basically just describes my life absolutely perfectly right now. It's everything going on. Yeah. In many major themes. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's move on to Virgo. I'm going to hand this over to Alex. And we've got these oppositions across the 12th and the 6th with the conjunction of Mars and Uranus happening in the 9th.
Okay. So Virgos, I think that Mars and Uranus in the 9th house, and all I kept thinking was like, I'm going to travel to Alaska and put it on a credit card. There's that that feeling of like, I'm going to go on a 2-month-long trip, but I'm putting it all on my visa. And there may be these sort of urges for freedom, exploration, rediscovering your own sense of belief and like how you see things, and a revolution in that regard, in the way you put things together in the world and how you sort of perceive reality. And that's coming from a place you may not be comfortable with in the 12th house. I'm thinking, Adam, a lot about, that idea of the 12th house being the sort of the unintegrated part, or the part of the self we don't often see. That it's one of the things I think is going to be very difficult for Virgo, and as the resident 3 planets in Virgo part of the panel here, I will say that it's very difficult to say can I do this without knowing exactly how it's going to go, and is it going to be perfect? And that there's a part of the psyche in Leo being the 12th house of being like, but I want to shine and be out there and allow myself a sense of, I don't care if it's perfect or precise or I have it all down. I just want to feel free to go explore. I just want to feel free to new ideas. I want to go get a degree, and I'm not sure exactly yet how I'm going to do that, but I really want to do it. I really want to go and travel, and I'll figure it out as I go. And not being reckless, but also recognizing that not everything has to have this innate sort of sense of plan to it. And opposing Pluto in the 6th house, that to me says something around like, it may feel really hard to do that. It may feel like, you know, there's a sense of internally, I have to climb over a couple of demons or face a couple of demons that are opposing me and saying like, hey, you really, that's going to be too hard to work, or no, you really shouldn't do that, or that's not practical, or that's not what good people do. Those sorts of Virgo thoughts can come up very easily. But I also think that Pluto in the 6th house can really represent an interesting diversion if you can trust it. It can divert you somewhere you may not have expected or even necessarily wanted to go. But if you can trust that process of where it's taking you, it could feel ultimately revolutionary and very liberating. Otherwise.
Love it. Dana, sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, I was thinking, you know, Alex, when you were talking about the 9th house, like a breakthrough in the ethos and your personal like operating principles feels really important for Virgo risings. Having this, you know, not to be stereotypical, like but the perfectionistic tendency, like this is how I do things, very step by step, right? And there's room for something different with this energy that I think could be very destabilizing for Virgos, but ultimately extremely helpful and productive.
Yeah, I feel like I was just giving this talk on the 12th house last month, and with Virgos, I feel like one of the 12th house, one of the ways you can conceptualize the blind spot of Leo being always the 12th whole sign from Virgo rising is in terms of the discomfort that Virgos feel with being like luminescent in front of other people, just effulgent and full of light and demonstrative, or like a performer. Like, I just feel like it's a little harder for the Virgo rising archetype to step into that. And I wonder here about shifting beliefs and ideas and thoughts when it comes to when it comes to self-esteem, self-worth, and almost like you could dare to believe that you're special this month.
Yes.
And, you know, something like that. That's the thought that came to my mind.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to, thank you. That was great. I love that one. Really interesting when you have planets all in those cadent houses, right? There's such liminal spaces, like the kinds of changes depicted by lots of big transits in those liminal spaces is also often not something that you'll see the manifestation of in more practical ways for a little while, because they are places that are conceptual, psychological, spiritual, philosophical, and often unconscious. And so, yeah, I wonder if that we were just looking at for Virgos, if that isn't something that doesn't play out over the next couple of months, in fact, especially as we also get some, like you're going to have the first of a bunch of eclipses that start coming into your 1st and 7th houses for Virgos too. So anyway, I could go on about that. Let's go to Libra. So
here's your reading, Dana.
Yay, can't wait.
Yes, we just had, so we had Leo, we've got Taurus. Now, you know, really the show is just about us reading for each other. So we've got all these for Libra rising. The Mars-Uranus conjunction is in the 8th with a bunch of oppositions coming across 11 and 5. I feel like, you know, similar for Libras, when Leo is in the 11th house, I feel like the natural diplomatic tendencies of Libra make it easy for you to associate with or gravitate toward people who are really impressive, right? Like the kind of Leonic allies come naturally for Libras. I feel like I've seen that my whole life. Cancer in your 10th house, always for Libras, along with being Libran in the 1st, suggests a dharma that's concerned with, you know, caretaking, nurturance, diplomacy, peace. I mean, the Libra, a Venus ruled sign, and Cancer, a lunar ruled sign in the 1st and the 10th, to me, always orient Libras toward a kind of needing to be of service, needing to be concerned with equity and the the welfare of other beings and diplomacy and peace and stuff like that. What I find really interesting here is that when you have a bunch of Leo planets in the 11th, again, I think it could be easy for Librans to associate with people who are Leonic, right? But not to be the Leonic type themselves. That's obviously not going to be true for every Libra rising. But in this case, I can't help but wonder if there isn't some greater call to depart from the cares or concerns of other people in order to step into the spotlight a little bit more. And the reason I say that is because Mars-Uranus in the 8th, ruled by Venus in the 11th, I see as sort of like, I don't have to always exist within a framework that says, it's better if other people have the spotlight and if I serve in some supporting capacity. Mars-Uranus in the 8th can break from that dynamic and say, as much as I value supporting other people and supporting spaces where people can step forth and shine, or I can nurture and foster the gifts of other people or something like that, that I need to break from relationships that are always supportive in nature. And I need to step out in some ways within a collective or a community or a group in order to shine out a little bit more. Your ascendant ruler is Venus in Leo, opposing Pluto in Aquarius in the 5th, which also tends to have the concern creatively for how this fits into a collective story that is of greater importance than myself. Mm-hmm. I feel like that narrative might be getting broken open a little bit this month, where it's like, now I'm important too, and I have special things to share, special gifts, special creative capacity. And I might need to sort of, again, just sort of like earlier with Taurus, you know, I might need to go like, I don't really care what you think if I'm going to disturb the peace or the balance or what have you. And I think this is also in line with having had South Node eclipses in the first house, where it's like, what do I need to let go of within myself? And for Libras or any Venus ruled sign, that can sometimes be the tendency to be over accommodating or something like that. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. But what do you guys think?
I mean, 100%. I think, you know, what's interesting, I don't know if this is specific to maybe this chart, but there's a dynamic that can exist. And I think it happens for Venus ruled signs very often, where someone will have done something really nice for you in the past, or really taken care of you, or offered themselves in some way. And there can be a feeling of like, with Libra, sometimes like I have never reestablished the balance. I have to keep doing things or feel obligated in some way. This is obviously the obligation in the 8th house. Like, I'm obligated to stay in this friendship, or I'm obligated to stay in this relationship, or I'm obligated to stay in this group because at one time 20 years ago they came to my rescue, and now I still kind of feel indebted forever. And I think that if you got Mars Uranus coming along in your 8th house, that's a firecracker that can really break that apart in a really healthy way, and just be like, is this something you really want to be a part of? Are you in the type of deep bonds you really want to be a part of? Or have you fulfilled the debt? Have you paid back what you need to? Or did you even need to at all? Because the tendency with Libra will always be the sense of like, I have to have balance. I have to have balance. And so I actually think that Mars-Uranus conjunction at 8th is really what's catching my eye as a powerful moment of liberation. Maybe uncomfortable, but ultimately really freeing.
If you think about like the Justice card in the tarot, I was just reading this beautiful from this book, Meditations on the Tarot. It was talking about, you know, the worldly form of justice, right? Which exists. We all know it. It's like, don't steal, like, you know, be generous, don't be jealous, like the 10 Commandments. There's all sorts of traditions morally around the world. And we sort of ingrain, we have a little moral system of like, don't treat people the way, you know, you wouldn't want to be treated, this kind of thing. So, but I feel like one of the hardest things for Libra, which is like the keeper of worldly justice, you know, is to imagine that your value and your worth and your beauty and your dharma is ultimately not tied to your righteousness, meaning like, how right do you get things? And sometimes the biggest, most audacious acts that are truly the most revolutionary and important for Libras are the ones where they feel as though they might be stepping outside the bounds of what is socially acceptable and doing things that could offend or disturb some moral sense of, well, it would be selfish if I did this. And it's like, yeah, well, there is something transgressive about following your creative dharma, regardless of how it affects other people, that Libras are anxious about because they have such a finely tuned sense of what is just and fair. And so I feel like offending or upsetting the scales and the balance that's kind of what I'm seeing especially with Mars Uranus in the 8th.
I love that. And I'll just say, as the resident Libra rising, for as much as we are focused on balance, it really is, in my lived experience, not evenly distributed between other and self. It's always from this other person perspective for me. And I love the idea of this conjunction in the 8th being a moment of like, well, what do I actually owe people? What do I owe myself?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
That's great. Well, on that note, we will shift back to Dana for Scorpio rising, where we see all of the oppositions from Leo to Aquarius across 10 and 4, and the conjunction with Mars Uranus in the 7th.
Okay, Scorpio rising. So thinking about this conjunction in the 7th, we're in the house of the other, of our closest partnerships, of marriage. So for me, this is the rising sign where I think that this could totally manifest through someone else. Like it could come up through your partners, right? And there's some kind of creative breakthrough here. It may come up as a fight, right? Like that's kind of the first thing that comes up for me when I think of this is maybe there's an argument with a partner, but there is the potential for it to create space and sort of break open this outdated dynamic. So that now we can have something that's more aligned, that feels better for everybody. It's going to take some discomfort to get there, though, because again, we've got Mars in Taurus. And so there's the courage to say what needs to be said. And that will ultimately lead to a more productive, healthier dynamic. But we're going to be destabilized in the process of getting there. Meanwhile, we've got this opposition happening between Leo in the 10th and Pluto in the 4th. So this is pulling tension between your public life, your career, and your home and family life and your most private self. I'm thinking about something within you or within your family dynamic that is ready to be transformed with Pluto in the 4th. There's something that you're ready to change. And it's being highlighted by what's going on in your public and private life. And this could certainly be playing a role in whatever comes up in the 7th house, whatever discussions, whatever sort of creative breakthroughs are happening with your partnerships. It's playing a role in this tension and this sort of fork in the road that you're getting between your public roles, your career, and your home and family life. So we are getting a lot of change for Scorpio risings, change in the home, realizing things that maybe we didn't see before kind of coming to the surface. And ultimately, it's going to be really productive for you, Scorpios.
Yeah, I feel like there could also be this way in which your relationship is experiencing a breakthrough because you or your partner or both of you are somehow excavating things from your family backgrounds. Because the Venus-Pluto opposition across the 10th and 4th is sort of like, well, you want to change because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and I want to change because of these reasons. But have we really explored the connection between these different motivations and their history, within our biographies? I could see that coming up too.
Yeah, I'm reflecting also on, really looking at it as a Scorpio rising, like when you in your partnerships, are you with people where you feel safe to let go of the ball, where you feel safe to really say like, you know what, I'm okay, here I am. That can feel very, very freeing. But also making the discernment, and Scorpios can be really good at this. Sometimes it can really go to the extreme, but like really saying like, or do I need to free myself from spaces that feel like, I can't quite be myself, or I can't quite release control here because it doesn't quite feel authentic or safe or something like that. But I think with Venus, especially moving through the top angle of your chart, there's something deeply healing around your relational style that is going on, and that it's okay for you to have a sense of individuality in the relationship that doesn't require you having your hands on the wheel all the time, because that gets really exhausting. That might be a really liberating part of that Mars-Uranus Venus dynamic.
Yeah, good point. Shifting now to you, Alex, let's take a look at The oppositions across 9 and 3 that we're seeing this month, from the Leo planets to Pluto and Aquarius, and then also the Mars-Uranus dynamic in the 6th.
Well, I think, Mars Uranus in the 6th is interesting because I think it could go a few different ways. I could see it as a sudden liberation or freedom from something that's just felt arduous, difficult, intractable. Especially in a fixed Earth sign that is just kind of stuck. All of a sudden, there's a sudden, the TNT comes along. I know it's a very dramatic image, but it comes along and breaks it free. It allows you to like sort of feel like, oh, that is now over, especially now with these planets coming together at the very end of the sign or the end of this house. It could also be a sudden need to, something that happens very Uranian, sudden need to persevere, to dig in and use that sort of Martian fortitude of like, there's something that's come up suddenly and I've got to kind of push through it. And I can push through it and I have the resources to push through it, but I got to kind of really dig to get there. And then you have, Pluto opposing these planets moving through your 9th house. So Pluto from your 3rd house opposing the planets in the 9th. I would say looking at what's coming up, or, you've needed to change in the everyday. You've known it for a while. It's kind of been there, but you're like, yeah. And now it's like, oh no, it needs to change. Like something needs to go now. And it feels there's somewhat of an urgency that comes up around it, whether that's from external circumstances or from your internal sense. But that kind of leads to this beautiful philosophy change in life. This sense of like, wow, I can put things together in a way that I have never put them together before. I can think about the way I relate to people, the way I shine in the world, the way I communicate, all in radically different ways. But it comes from this sense of like, what's around me every day, something's got to go. Something's got to go. Something has to be composted so that material can be used to generate new life. So that's my general sense for Sag risings this month.
Yeah. I love this as a change in how you approach like the work of life. My husband is a Sag rising and he does not do well with drudgery. Not that that's, the case for all Sag risings, but I'm thinking about him a little bit here and thinking about how this 9th house action could give us like a different perspective to how we approach the minutia and the chores of life. That's very liberating and freeing. And like, you know what, like maybe if I approach this with a little more joy, a little more peace, a little more consciousness, thinking about the sun opposing Pluto, like it doesn't have to feel like drudgery,
I also feel like I'm going to take it in a totally different direction and just say that if Mars Uranus comes up in the 6th house, which was traditionally called, the house of bad fortune. And like, when I understand how relative and mundane that phrase bad fortune was for ancient people, bad fortune would mean like, I have to work in the heat of the sun. It's that simple. It's a necessary part of life for them, not an evil, or it's to them, the fact that they're the ancient astrologers, the fact that difficult things exist is no more true or untrue, or it's not a bummer. It's just a truth. It's like, yeah, life, if you want to build something, you have to put some blood, sweat, and tears into it. You could call in a sense, that's the bad fortune that all things that end up looking very nice are built from. So they have this very extraordinarily broad way of looking at bad fortune. And what I wonder here, for Sagittarians who are Jupiter ruled, right? It's a sign, especially Jupiter ruled signs, usually have a hard time imagining that things that are dark or unfortunate are not also evil or bad, that they shouldn't exist. And that's just a natural part of what Jupiter, like whatever Jupiter is good at, that lives in the shadow, because Jupiter is morally triumphant over darkness. Jupiter is spring, not winter. All these things that Jupiter naturally exudes may have a difficult time just accepting the hardships, frustrations, failings, etc. So anyway, my long-winded point here is that Mars Uranus can come up as something that is sudden, dramatic, and quote unquote unfortunate. Wouldn't there be an incredible revolution in our perception of reality if we understood at the exact same time why that was beautiful and necessary?
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can almost see it like sometimes you get sick, a very sixth house thing. It could be a cold, it could be, a twisted ankle, whatever. And you think to yourself, well, that sucked. But as Venus and Mercury and the sun are all opposing Pluto from the 9th to the 3rd, could it be that whatever the unexpected setback is, you somehow are in receipt of the philosophical understanding of its place in your life? Like, oh, that makes sense. I can receive this difficult thing. I can overcome. I can persevere. I can deal with it because I have some understanding of why it's necessary.
Yeah.
That's how I feel like that was an angle that came up while you guys were talking. I thought about that.
I love that.
Let's go on to Capricorn, and we're going to look at this is opposite Cancer, so we've got some of the same exact houses active. Uranus, Mars in the 5th, and the oppositions across the Leo Aquarius axis from 8 to 2. So for Capricorns, first of all, when I think about what the dharma of a Capricorn rising, I think, for example, of the slow incremental progress of the light returning during the darkness of winter, and it was called the Gateway of the Gods. And it was associated with the idea that you have to turn your back on the world in some way in order to rise above your entanglements within it. That's the sort of mystical view of Capricorn. Climb the mountain, go to the hermitage, go to the ashram on top of the mountain, leave the world behind, the opposite world sign being Cancer, the gateway of mankind in the fertile valley of life. Nope, leave the valley behind. It's entangling. In order to individuate, you have to leave your mama. It's like that, like Capricorn has kind of like that mentality. But that can strip us of joy if we're not careful, right? Climbing a mountain, being so serious, leaving the world behind. There are things we need to transcend and overcome through hard work, discipline, effort, maturity, resourcefulness, cunning. And Capricorn is great at those things. But I, obviously, being a Capricorn moon myself, and then working with tons of Cap rising people, my dad being one of them, there is a real struggle sometimes when it comes to locating joy. Like, how do you go up that mountain while you're whistling or singing, or maybe you bring a little mandolin with you or something? It's like you can't just live a joyless life because there's some goal that is, that requires you to be serious all the time. I see the Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 5th house as the audacious idea that this great work of your life could be more fun. It could be more enjoyable, and there is some kind of creative breakthrough that is required so that it be more joyful. The other thing is that it seems to involve this idea that the joy is going to be found in other people to a certain extent. Another thing that's sometimes difficult for Capricorns, who tend to be very like solo expeditioners. I've got the pack, I've got the cross on my shoulders, I'm carrying it. Very independent as Earth signs go, and with Leo, the Leo planets in the 8th, also just the sun in general transiting through Cancer in the 7th this time of year, a couple of new moons in Cancer, or a full moon, new moon axis across Cancer, and Capricorn taking place in July. I just think to myself, part of how you locate that joy is opening yourself up to other people, and opening yourself up to being influenced by other people, and opening yourself up to the joy that other people show you how to tap into. So that's kind of what I'm seeing for Caps. What do you guys think?
I'm as you were talking out, I was reflecting on it's in one of Pema Chodron, the Buddhist teacher's book. I can't remember which book it's from, but she was talking about how she attended a workshop on joy, and how she had realized, and this happens in Buddhism, we're just preoccupied with suffering and dealing with your suffering and climbing the hill of suffering, and what's the suffering that's arising. And she said, she told the teacher, we're not talking about suffering. And the teacher said, because it's about joy. Like we're the whole point of all of this is a sense of joy, is a sense of expansion, is a sense of being free from, or those bonds and change. And I think that it's really important to remember that as you're climbing the mountain, you can sing. As you're climbing the mountain, you can do karaoke. That might be just something I do with Venus and Capricorn. Just saying. But I think also there's something about Pluto moving into the 2nd house here that may have you look at where are the shadows of how you defined your worth. Is it only through being serious and responsible and getting things done and presenting the sort of good, hardworking face to the world? And, it may have a sense, nice Adam, kind of riffing off what you're saying about other people here, like with Venus opposing Pluto from the 8th house of like, it's okay for other people to be a source of the way that you perceive your value. And I was saying, like, we appreciate what you're doing. You know, I think there's this kind of myth of like, our worth has to only come from us. It's only about our worth and self-value. But, you know, for Capricorns, that's pretty easy to do. And I think that when you say like, hey, my worth is also about like, you know, the things that people value, and let them say, hey, I really value that. Thank you so much. And taking that in and trusting that like you can really receive that and that can feel good. That's okay. I think it's a really important lesson this month that might come up for Capricorns.
Yeah. I love that. I don't have much to add because I deeply resonate with that. My mom's a Cap rising. And so I see a lot of what y'all are saying in the way that she operates, but thinking about how like what you share with others like can be a source of joy. Just thinking about that 8th house transit and how, you can learn that like what you share with other people is something to be valued and is something that can be deeply fulfilling, even if it's not like directly in service of what you want to achieve for yourself.
Yeah. You know, I have to reference the Lord of the Rings at least once. So what comes to my mind is like it's such a Capricornian myth. Yeah. Tolkien was Sun in Capricorn in the 5th house. You know, Frodo has this weight to carry. It's very Capricornian. He's got to carry the ring all the way to the mountain, chuck it into the fire. And it is so important along the way that he has this joyful companion that is there to remind him of his humanity, of his laughter, of life back in the Shire. And he can't do it for him, but he can help along the way. And most importantly, he keeps him laughing and telling stories. And I feel like the Capricorns need a Sam. You know what I mean? Like, and not just a Sam, but you need Sams plural in your life. And I feel like that's what this month is sort of about. And I just couldn't help myself. Sorry.
That's okay. I got Star Wars going early. This is about time for Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
It was time.
And Dana, you're going to have to bring your favorite myths in movies, whatever, as we go.
I will.
So for serving Dana's little, I got to get the arrow here for you. Okay. So you got Aquarius now with all these oppositions from 7 to 1 with Mars Uranus in the 4th for Aquarius rising.
Okay, so let's start for Aquarius risings in the 1st house with Pluto. So Pluto's been in the 1st house for a little bit now. It's been bopping back and forth between the 1st and the 12th. So you're obviously undergoing a major transformation of your identity. And that's slow moving. Like Pluto's going to be here for a while, but I'm sure that as you're listening to this, you're aware of how that's showing up, right? Like Pluto in the 1st is not going to be quiet. It's going to be obvious, probably, the ways in which your self-concept, perhaps your identity, perhaps your health and your approaches to health are transforming, needing to be transformed, undergoing this sort of composting, regeneration process. That is opposing all the planets moving into Cancer in the 7th house. So there's something about your relationships that is, again, acting as this mirror back to you of like, how am I transforming? What needs to be transformed? How is that changing my relationships? And so you're sort of navigating that dance while this conjunction in the 4th between Uranus and Mars is happening. And of course, the 4th house, it is about home, it is about family and lineage, and it is also about your most private self. So I'm wondering for Aquarius risings, what you're realizing about what you need to feel grounded, whether that's externally in your home, like what do you need in your space to feel like safe and secure, but also maybe what do you need in terms of like a self-awareness practice, for instance, or an emotional awareness practice. It's being informed by Pluto in the 1st. So there's something really profound happening in your identity that's being activated through your relationships. And then also you've got this deep kind of liberation happening within you that's kind of all happening at the same time. So it's a really pivotal moment, I think, for Aquarius risings in this long Pluto story arc that you're going to be experiencing in the 1st house. And I think it's going to give you some space to feel more grounded in your literal home and in your family, but also in your, internal temple as well.
Yeah, the plates are moving this month. I feel like the 4th house is in the earth is like plates below the surface. And I feel like there's maybe like small earthquakes. I want to put them as small because it doesn't have to be the world's most dramatic thing, but there's shifting with respect to the structures and foundations of things. And with Venus being in the 7th, I completely agree with what Dana was saying, that this earthy shifting of foundations and structures is going to follow along the lines of the tension between relationships and identity transformation that's continuing to be really, really important for Aquarians right now.
You know, I also go back to this idea of like, you know, what would a Taurian revolution look like for an Aquarius rising? It might just be, you know, it can be so Aquarius is so conceptual and in, you know, figuring it out in the intellectual sphere, just feeling like at the end of the day, you can go home, close the door, and you are in a safe embodied space that you can have the comforts of home around you. You can cuddle up with someone you love. You can cuddle up with your pet. You can have a space where you don't have to figure it out up here about how all the pieces link together. You can just come on like, this feels comfortable. This feels safe. This feels, and that might be, you know, for an Aquarius rising, someone with strong air in their chart, that can be a real revolution of understanding with Uranus and Mars there. Yeah.
Well, we are on to Pisces to round out our horoscopes today. We have these oppositions across the 6th and 12th. Alex has the very difficult but admirable task of describing all of these energies in the liminal spaces of the cadent houses. God bless you.
Thank you.
So here, Mars, Uranus in the 3rd, oppositions across the 6th and the 12th. Pisces rising, go.
Oh shit. First of all, I'll say with cadent houses, I was thinking as we were talking about, I think we were talking about Virgos falling away. First, I think for Pisces, you know, Saturn in your first house, Neptune right at the very end of your first house, the cadent house is all being lit up. This strikes me as you might have to let some things fall away, just in a general sense, that have culminated, that are now moving out of the general highlighted space of your life or the apex of areas in your life. I would say with Mars and Uranus in the 3rd house, in Taurus, again, it's, you know, for Pisces that we, you know, like to exist with their feet just slightly off the ground. Like there's a feeling like I just like to float, and I like to be somewhat more connected to spirit than to form sometimes. I think and I know for doing energy work and sometimes doing energy work from home, you have to have a grounded environment around you. You have to have a space around you that feels like it is solid, it is stable. You have comfortable rituals that are in place that really make you feel like I can have my feet on the ground, because that keeps me in the space where I can really do my work well. And a Taurian revolution in the 3rd house might be through what I want to surround myself with. I need to have a space of feeling grounded, embodied, incarnated. And that's okay. It's okay to feel like that, because that's going to allow you to sort of go off into the spaces you want to explore in the ether. With Pluto moving into your 12th house, I don't think that this would actually be a space that's wholly unrecognizable to Pisces, and especially as opposing the Venus in the 6th. I think that Pluto in the 12th house is actually a great ally, because it may show you some difficult things that are hard to see, that don't feel like the gossamer silk that I think Pisces are often used to. It feels a little bit more like, you know, the jackboots in the mud, but ultimately is sending you on a journey with these planets moving through the 6th house of maybe a tough journey. Maybe a journey where you're going to see some things you don't want to see, which is always, I think, a very 6th house thing, is like, oh, wow, I just got to see all these aspects of myself or something going on I didn't necessarily want to see. But ultimately frees you up to feel more incarnated, that being in your body and being in the sensual material pleasures of life can feel liberating and freeing in a way that I don't think Pisces are often quite attuned to or feel comfortable with.
Nicely put. Yeah, I feel like one thing that came to my mind as you were talking there, Alex, is when you have Mars Uranus in the 3rd house, right? The idea is that there's some disturbance in the environment. Like if I always use the fish tank. If you're in the fish tank, you know, Freddie, your neighbor fish, just got electrocuted on the heater or something. Like, it's terrible. It's like there's something. Sorry, that was awful. I just killed a fish. Sorry, guys. I'm not trying to kill any fish with Pisces rising. So, Mars Uranus though is like there's something around you in the environment that's a little shocking, right? It's unexpected or that's disturbing the ecosystem of your life mentally, psychically, emotionally. The third house is called the joy of the moon. It is a conscious place, but like sort of semi-conscious, because it's just as constant and fluid as like your living room. You know your living room. Everybody knows their living room, but you may not notice on that one day where, you know, your kid takes something from a totally different part of the house and places it in that living room, and it may take you a minute to go like, oh, that's out of place, or that's something different. But this is something that's really announcing itself as different and protruding in the environment. And I think there's going to be ripples in terms of how that affects your relationships. And like, there's something that's maybe drawing your attention. It's something in the environment that pops out, but it draws your attention to something in a relationship, or vice versa. The Venus-Pluto opposition happens. There's a little bit of conflict in relationships, and it immediately draws your attention to something that needs to change in the environment. And in this, I want to say again that I did not intentionally mean to kill any fish.
They're very sensitive, Adam. Be careful with the Pisces.
I just got my daughter. Like, seriously, like, I just got my daughter a little fish tank, and she's 8. She really wanted a fish tank, so I got a really small little fish tank. It's like 5 gallons or something, and we got a couple of fish. And you know, when you're first getting the water like all perfectly, you got to get it all set up. And like, God, if the first 2 fish didn't die, and they died within like 3 days, and then my daughter was just, she was just heartbroken. And I was like, well, sweetie, fish are, it's like, so now we've got 2, and they're doing fine, right? But it was like oh my God, it was traumatic, because I was just thinking like, well, they're fish, they die. I've had fish tanks over time, and like fish die, it happens. And for my daughter though, it was like, this is death. She had never really, you know what I mean? It was like, anyway, so that's probably in the background of my mind, which is why I said the thing about Freddie dying.
Poor Freddie, R.I.P.
Anything you guys want to add? Anything else we want to add to Pisces rising?
Quickly, I'll just say I'm thinking, Adam, you mentioned the third house being the joy of the moon. That was sort of what was on my mind with this conjunction in the third. A change in the routine and the daily ritual that ends up being really liberating, and maybe helping you kind of see that blind spot that maybe Pluto in the 12th is bringing up, since these transits we're talking about are really intimately connected. I love just like having the courage or the willpower to do your daily life a little bit differently, and then seeing what that opens up for you.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, we made it. We got through all 12 whole sign horoscopes. I want to tell you about how you can connect more with Alex and Dana. I am so thankful. Dana, this was really fun. Alex and I were just super stoked we were like, well, it'll probably it's like a jam band. It's going to take a while to figure out how to jam, but I feel like this has been gelling like really quickly. I'm very excited about it.
Cool.
You can find Alex at alexamorosi.com, where you can book a reading with him or work with him in his capacity as an energy healer. Instagram is Alex Amorosi Healing. I highly recommend following him for his regular newsletters, astrological content. I am also super glad to be introducing Dana's work on Instagram. She is Self-Help Witch and also makes great regular astrological content. And then Dana, there is an interesting club that you have, like an astrology club that you can join for regular learning and other offerings. We just mentioned that really, really quickly here. It's at selfhelpwitch.com/club.
Yeah, so this is a brand new thing that I've created. It's called the Cosmic Co-Creator Club, and it's all about creating a living astrology practice. So kind of going beyond listening to content, although that's super helpful. Obviously, you're here, you know that, but really taking it and using it in a tangible way to work with the archetypes, to cultivate mindfulness, to understand yourself, and there's more, but it's essentially a place where you can learn how to really apply your cosmic insights to your daily life.
Amazing. I will tell you right now that you are easily the coolest high school English teacher that I know of.
Well, thanks. I'll take that. Thanks.
Agreed. I'll support that.
So, thank you guys for being here. We will be back together again next month. Don't forget, we have a couple of cool speaker series talks coming up this July. There's the Jupiter Saturn square in August. plus some retrogrades we'll be exploring. So lots of good stuff to come. Another just big welcome to Dana to the show. We're so glad that you were here this month. Alex, as always, it's a pleasure to have you as well. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys again next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.